On this episode, Garrett saw the Joker. Was it really worth all the controversy? Martin Scorsese comments about Marvel, and American culture clashes with the Hong Kong riots. I'm Joe.
I'm Garrett, and this is the Aliens and Cowboys podcast. Welcome in tonight, guys. So, a little bit different episode tonight. We don't know if we're going to go as long. We're just going to have a couple different topics to talk about. Some interesting ones. I did see the Joker over the weekend.
Yeah, that's right.
It was very well done, and I'll go into more detail about that here in a few minutes.
Sure.
We're going to talk about some stuff in between, and then we're going to end on some controversy going on within kind of not really so much Hollywood yet, although it's very quick that it could transcribe into Hollywood.
Yeah, but sounds like it could lead to it.
Yeah, but definitely the NBA, which I'm a big fan of. So we'll kind of reach on that as well. But let's start with the Joker.
Yeah.
So it was really funny, Joe, because over the weekend, and really, well, I should start this. I didn't see you Friday or Monday because I had jury duty. It was a murder trial. I got pulled in. I actually knew the defendant, and I'm assuming the officer on scene. So I kind of got kicked out of jury duty.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Not personal friend of mine for the convicted or suspected murderer, but just happened to know who the person was. But during that time period, I was on Twitter because I'm on, I'm at jury duty, have not a lot going on,
right.
And I'm just going through articles, and it seems like it's CNN article after CNN article after CNN article, just bashing the Joker movie. And I had not seen it at this time, and my initial thought is, and I've always kind of erred on the caution of, movies are movies. I grew up as a kid. I remember my favorite movie was like Terminator 2, which is pretty violent. I really enjoyed the movie The Rock growing up. Is one of my other favorite movies. I was a huge Nick Cage fan. And so I've never been one to think that violence in movies perpetuates into real life. Now, I'm not naive to think there are people that can be tempted to do that and can be pushed into that. So again, not naive. I've just never been one of those people. So, whatever you want to call it, my not taking, pop culture and turning it into a mass murder privilege. When I see things like these articles bashing this movie before a lot of people have even seen it, I'm assuming and hoping that the people who wrote these articles have seen this movie. I always laugh at it because I can't imagine it's any worse than, a lot of other movies that are out that these people probably even voted for Academy Awards. And 100% correct. But I remember I was sending you these articles, and we're just like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
Like, should this movie be made? This movie shouldn't have been made. This is a violence. All this is going to do is push incel violence. This shouldn't win any awards. There's no reason we should reward this film. It should never have happened. Somebody wrote an article about the song where the Joker's dancing down the steps, and it's like the Hey song for like sporting events, and they try to tie it to the fact that the writer of the song was a convicted pedophile or child molester. I don't think many people knew that.
I did not know that.
But this is the same Academy that gave a round, standing applause to Roman Polanski, trying to get him to come back, and he's a convicted child, molester as well. So that, whatever, they're fake outrage on that. But there was this really funny tweet this guy had, and it summed up perfectly all this angst from specifically CNN, and I didn't know why CNN had such vitriolic feeling for this movie.
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know if it was just it's a way to get ratings, which I'm assuming it is. I didn't look up any of the particular names of these CNN opinion articles, and I think that's what they are. I think they're opinion articles. I don't think they're, full-time staff writers. But this guy tweets out and he goes, with all this vitriolic hate CNN has, you'd make it think, you'd think that the Joker movie shot CNN's parents, you know what I mean, in an alley.
Right.
And, kind of comparing the analogy of CNN to Batman growing up and just wants to take out the Joker in no other way. Anyways, it was just kind of interesting. So went to the movie, to make a long story longer, with my wife.
What did you think of the movie?
Yes. My wife wanted to go see it as well. And so, funny thing is, I wasn't really planning to see it in theaters. My wife bought tickets and said, yeah, let's go. She wanted to know what all the hoopla was. Now, I will say, kind of interesting, and probably because it's just happened to be I read all the articles about it, obviously when I'm in the theater, I'm on edge a little bit because what I'm being told every day is there's going to be a mass shooting at this theater.
Right.
I'm told through every article that
every
someone's
article
gonna
leading up
shoot
to
somebody
it.
at this movie.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of on edge just looking around. If you see somebody sitting alone, you're like, oh my God, that guy's going to be the person that does it. But movie starts, movie ends. And I'll tell you this is my review, and I'm not going to try to do too many spoilers. There's not really much you can spoil on the Joker story. Everybody kind of knows the Joker story. And, I don't know if they're breaking fresh ground on this, but I will say it is a fantastic performance by Joaquin Phoenix. I think it is the best performance I have seen of somebody playing the Joker.
Okay.
And I was previously on record actually I was a Jack Nicholson fan.
Yeah, that's true.
I think this is better. The way he twists and turns, and it's creepy and it's very dark. That is 100% accurate. When they say it's a dark film, it very much is a dark film. Violence, though, there's not a lot of violence in this movie. And when it happens, there's only probably one scene that is arguably bloody. The rest of it's just no different than any other movie. And I'll tell you right now, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is way more violent in the ending of that film than this particular movie is from front to end, or from start to finish. So I will say, great performance, amazing, best Joker performance. He would deserve to win an Academy Award. And the ironic thing is, between Heath Ledger and Joaquin Phoenix, not to be controversial, if you had to tell me which actor's portrayal would lead to the actor's death, I'd say Joaquin Phoenix's. He got so into that character that, to me, that would be a mental transformation taking place that it'd be hard for him to come back from. So, sorry, I've gone on this little monologue here for a few minutes. So
that's perfect. I mean, Joker has kind of captivated the news and media in general for the past few weeks now. So it only stands to reason. I'm glad you did see it, because I wanted to get someone's opinion who I actually knew and was friends with. Okay, what's the movie actually like? Because you keep seeing all these different articles out there, just like you were saying, some in particular, not just even CNN, like over the weekend, the number of articles that are really kind of hit pieces on it seem to just completely snowball. And per our last episode, when I'd mentioned that prior to when that became the popular way to cover this movie, it seems like, it had nothing but positive things in the news originally, at least that I saw. And then, for whatever reason, this became the trend on how we're going to cover the Joker, and that's all you see now. So I'm glad you saw it. I mean, I mentioned last time as well, I'm not necessarily rushing to theaters to see this movie. I do want to see it eventually, though. So when it comes out on, Blu-ray, DVD, I'll certainly give it a watch, because I also want to see how his performance compares to Heath Ledger and Jack Nicholson, because both of those are still phenomenal. I personally, per our Joker episode, you can check that out in our archives, you guys. But I'm definitely a Heath Ledger fan in regard to his interpretation of the Joker, so I do want to see Joaquin Phoenix's interpretation of that and kind of how it stacks up against the others. So.
Yeah, and a couple things to talk about in regards to where this Joker movie will fit in, for instance, in the larger DC universe.
Yeah.
You've brought this up in previous episodes. I don't remember a specific one. Might have even been a couple. You made the argument, or at least asking, if this was a Joker movie or a movie where they just happened to make it and then title this person the Joker. Now, there are references to the Batman universe in this movie, but there's not many. There's maybe 3 or 4.
Gotcha.
You could eliminate those 3 or 4 references and still have the same movie with the same outcome, and it could just not be technically the Joker. So I do say that with the caveat that although I think it's the best Joker performance, it's very well that it could have been a movie where this isn't the Joker. It just happens to be, Arthur Fleck is just a person who his job is to dress up as a clown and go and make people laugh, and tries to be a stand-up comic, and just basically goes through the Michael Douglas falling down scenario where he just snaps. But it is very, it's a very interesting film. Like I said, I saw stuff today. I think the Hollywood Reporter had an article today. Steinberg, I think, is the author's last name. And he argued that this shouldn't win any Academy Awards, and I think that's false. These are the same people who nominated Clockwork Orange for Best Picture, and this is not. I mean, the overt violence is different now than like the 1970s. So there's more blood on TV now, but this is no different than any Law and Order SVU episode, because those scare the crap out of me.
Yeah, same with Criminal Minds, man.
Right.
Like, I haven't seen Joker, obviously, as we've established, but I used to watch Criminal Minds. That show used to scare me beyond belief. And they don't necessarily shy away from showing some things on that show either that's very disturbing. So, I mean, and I'm sure there is outrage over some of those episodes as well that I just haven't read about. But still, once again, for this to have captivated the media and news outlets the way that it has, and it's been covered the way that it has, where other things seem to be immune to it that are arguably more violent and more terrible with what they're showing, it's just kind of mind-boggling. I don't quite understand why they chose that. I guess to get clicks, to get the traffic.
I mean, I know
anything controversial is going to get views, you know. So
I'm a Tarantino fan, and I know all of his movies can be very bloody, but almost bloody in a goofy way sometimes.
Yeah, it's a bit over the top.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, way more violent and blood than what's in this particular movie.
Right.
And I think one of the biggest controversies I heard and criticisms of this movie was they throw a curveball at you to make you sympathize with him. And I'm not saying that's wrong. There comes a time where you this guy who's beaten down, he goes through some stuff that's not his fault. The first time he gets attacked, and the first time he's killing people, he's actually being attacked, so he's kind of defending himself.
Okay.
So it's not like he's overtly just out there to pull a Heath Ledger. You know what I mean? But his backstory is sympathetic. Like, he goes through a really rough time. They talk about his past, and it's not happy.
Right.
So and I think people thought that was a curveball, and I don't know why they think that's a curveball. I think most people that would grow up and do what he does in the film probably didn't have the best upbringing. There's not a lot of people that come from the high echelons of society. They're going around committing mass murder, or going around going crazy. So I don't know. I think they're going to see a lot of backpedaling now as more and more people see this. It is very successful. I don't know if it's surpassed Deadpool yet. It's right there, I think, as far as surpassing Deadpool.
Okay.
As a rated R comic book movie.
Wow.
But it has passed Logan, and Logan's considered by some to be the best comic book movie of all time.
Yeah, that's true.
It's very successful.
Yeah,
Now,
go ahead. No, I was just going to say something that I thought was interesting. Not a ringing endorsement for Justice League, but I guess this was just shy in terms of box office figures for its opening weekend. And I apologize the exact amount, but it came up just short of Justice League's release and their opening weekend. And this is an R-rated comic book movie that arguably no one was really even asking for. If you go back weeks and weeks and weeks ago when the very first trailer for Joker dropped, I think I even mentioned that. I'm like, who's asking for this? This was before we knew anything about it, before all this controversy. And I was very critical of it, actually. I'm like, who's even asking for this movie about the Joker, And so now we're here, and it was opening weekend just shy of Justice League. That is baffling.
Yeah,
it's insane.
It's successful. And, it's interesting because we talked about Marvel versus DC and what they have coming up. And, they showed the trailer for Birds of Prey, which I'm not a Harley Quinn fan. I didn't really care for Suicide Squad. It's not my thing. I'm not a big DC guy.
Sure.
So I don't know if I'll see that movie in theaters. I will probably see it if it came to HBO. HBO generally has some Justice League movies on there, or DC movies on there through HBO. But I can't imagine that's not going to be more violent than Joker.
Yeah, that also looks very dark. Like you said, Ewan McGregor's character seems to be maybe losing his mind or going insane in some capacity. There's very little we know about Birds of Prey yet, but still, it's something that, do we look at the backstory to these characters, and then also is the amount of actual gore shown? Is that how we're going to be critiquing these movies, or is it just the straight up violence, regardless of the blood and gore aspect of it, that makes it worse? And I think that there's very inconsistent ways that we review movies, or we being people who actually review the movies, the media in general, for how they treat those different topics and how they treat violence in films. It's very uneven.
Correct.
For how they look at that. So,
well, and you already know they're going to come out and say this, and it is. It's a feminist approach to things, and it's going to be a story of 5 women, and they're just going to basically go around causing mayhem and being essentially this. They're being toxic. If this was 5 guys, there would be articles written about toxic masculinity, and I guess I don't understand why this isn't toxic as well. It shouldn't be a gender norm, male or female, for what's toxic. It should just be what is the behavior and if that's toxic. So, and I know that everybody likes Harley Quinn. That's great. Margot Robbie does a great job with the performance, I'm sure. But it also goes to say, from what I argued a week ago, this is the pivot they should take. Make them dark, make them rated R, and move them forward.
This definitely supports your argument there, because my point, I don't think I made my point very well. Justice League underperformed at the box office when it released. So to say that Joker, being an R-rated film, which prior to recent years, especially in the comic book side of things, didn't always have huge box office numbers. I get that there's Blade, there's some exceptions to this. But while Justice League underperformed, Joker's coming in and just, I think it was 500,000 shy of that release. So Justice League, that should have been their flagship for DC, and it performed terribly at the box office. And here comes an R-rated spinoff no one really even initially asked for, and it's kind of taking things over. So to your point, Garrett, it seems like that would work for them potentially to do that. So yeah, I'm interested to see where the future of DC goes from here.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You brought up Justice League. I'll tell you one thing, though, from the Joker, which makes it... the reason why I also feel like this is successful, and it kind of maybe more so similar to Aquaman, not so much Shazam, because Shazam was really bad about this, but where Birds of Prey is going to be, is their villains. I've always felt like the DC universe has had really bad villains, or really bad CGI with their villains, which is why Marvel's always been so successful. They kind of just use stand-ins for humans like Killmonger, right? Baron Zemo. They're not really fighting these
Loki and everything
overt monster type characters. The Joker doesn't really have a demon that they're fighting, or a villain. He arguably is the villain. There's societal structures that are arguably the bad guy in this film. But Birds of Prey, Ewan McGregor, isn't CGI'd version of a monster.
Right.
Aquaman, what's his name? Patrick Wilson.
Yeah, that's right.
Not a CGI'd version of a monster either.
Yeah.
And so I feel like these transitioning to villains that you can arguably get behind, that you can tell who they are, what they are, I think is successful. Now, like I said, Shazam might be an outlier because Shazam and even Wonder Woman, for say, they were really well received. The villains weren't as great, but at least Danny Huston in Wonder Woman was still, you could tell who he was.
Right.
But I think that that's something going forward. They need to really be selective on who their villains are, which is, interesting too, because there's rumor of that Batman movie coming out with Robert Pattinson, and the fact that there was talks about potentially having Jonah Hill play the Penguin. And returning him to that mafia character, kind of like I think that the character from Gotham, the TV show, is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
I think if they take that realism of these actors, or not the actors, but these characters that the actors are portraying, I think that will lend credibility to DC, basically being revitalized.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And ultimately, that's what the Dark Knight trilogy did. I mean, Christopher Nolan grounded his interpretation of otherwise very fantastical elements. He made Bane not this huge, ginormous monstrosity of a person. He made Bane, Tom Hardy, in a mask.
Right.
And he grounded that performance. Same with Heath Ledger's Joker, of course. He grounded that performance. It was very clearly someone who was unhinged, but it's not the Joker gas, right? It's not these fantastical comic book elements that are being utilized to tell your story. And, of course, that's one of the best comic book trilogies of all time. I mean, those are phenomenal films from start to finish.
And I agree with you. I'm still partial to Bane. I really enjoy.
Sure, yeah, I know you like Bane.
I just think he's such a great character, and the idea that a real direct threat to Batman. I never felt like the Joker was a direct threat. The Heath Ledger's Joker was a direct threat to Batman. It was Bane that is literally could have killed him.
Yeah,
and chose not to, and it's his own hubris that he doesn't. But digressing. I think DC has, they definitely have ground to cover, right? They're not going to do a 22-movie arc like Marvel did.
No.
They're probably not going to be as well received as Endgame is. But they can do better on the, especially going forward, because we don't know how great Phase 4 is going to be for Marvel as far as movies. We know that they're going to have amazing, content on, Disney Plus. Again, coming, T-minus, 3 weeks now?
Yeah.
But I think that going forward, they should continue their recipe. They should continue to make it dark because, again, DC is just darker. And I think that that's serving them well, and I don't think they should go away from it. And I think it's in their interest or in their advantage that they're not owned by Disney for that matter.
Sure. Something I always find interesting, too, between how the films have often portrayed these characters versus their comic books is, as a kid, if you would have asked me which one is more campy between the two, which one's more lighthearted, I would have said DC over Marvel. I would have said Marvel's the more serious between the two. So I think it's interesting now that we have so many movies to reference. I mean, how many comic movies have there been since 2000?
Right.
A ton of them, right? And yes, I agree with you. The fact that DC, film-wise, has kind of leaned into darker elements, and Marvel is the fun one, kind of air quotes here, for how they choose to portray their characters. Whereas comic book-wise, just because it seems, in my mind anyway, this is more opinion than anything, but comic book characters from the DC universe are just a little bit more flashy. Their costumes are a little bit more outlandish overall than what I tend to think of for Marvel. Obviously, you have some crazy costumes with Marvel, too. But it's just interesting to see this translate to screen and who's becoming a darker kind of take on comic books versus a lighter take. So
yeah, I think you're not wrong on that. To kind of put a bow on this, too, it's interesting because Marvel's villains, if you really not since, I like Civil War. I think that's the best movie, Captain America Civil War.
Fantastic, yes.
But I think outside of, Winter Soldier, Baron Zemo, Killmonger, and probably, Thanos. That's 4 villains of what? Let's see here. That maybe 5 or 6 movies tops of a 22 movie arc.
Yeah, it's just
so of 22 films, there's only 6 instances where the villain is arguably nuanced enough to be like, yeah, that's awesome villain. That's a great performance or a great villain. Because other times you get, nothing wrong with Mickey Rourke, but you get Mickey Rourke's performance in Iron Man 2, I think it is.
Yeah, Whiplash as a villain is a little...
It's a little more campy.
Underwhelming.
Or you get, I'm trying to... can't think of his name. Jeff Bridges from Iron Man 1.
Which, in terms of nuance, I wouldn't say it's his character's nuance, but that was a great... that's kind of what the MCU hinged on, was the performances there. So Robert Downey Jr. opposite Jeff Bridges in that original Iron Man.
No, I agree. It's
really
not
great.
Again, not a bad film.
No, I'm not saying, it's a bad film or a bad performance. I get what you're saying.
But when we talk about villains and we talk about the movies, I think DC has had some good villains in the, going forward. And Marvel has too. Arguably Killmonger might be the most nuanced villain we've had of either franchise to this point.
Yeah.
And, I think going forward that's important. As movies become more gray, shades of gray, less good versus evil, obviously Star Wars is moving that direction.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have these nuanced characters because you could get behind them and they're deeper, and there's people arguing for Killmonger to somehow be resurrected and come back in Black Panther 2, which probably is not happening. So, anyways, to put another second bow on this topic, let's move to Scorsese. You brought up Scorsese earlier.
Yeah, I did. I know Marvel's been making headlines here for a couple different things, but I didn't pull any direct quotes from Martin Scorsese, and he's not the first famous director, producer, actor. Been multiple people with multiple career paths that have said things similar to this, but he's the most recent one to say that Marvel movies are not cinema, essentially. So he's coming out and saying that he's tried to watch these films, has been unsuccessful in doing so, and he just does not consider them to be a true movie, it seems like. I'm paraphrasing there. But obviously a lot of backlash, at least from the Marvel fan community, in regard to this. A lot of people saying that, well, you can't call anything that you've done cinema and then consider Marvel movies to not be cinema. And a lot of what he seemed to indicate was that it lacks kind of emotional maturity, let's say, to tell a story that conveys emotion that you can relate to with these characters. And I disagree with him there too. I think Marvel movies, I talked a couple episodes ago about how Guardians of the Galaxy 2 made me cry when I was watching it,
That's so lame.
Well, it did, It's those things that do catch you off guard. It's powerful performances that catch you off guard. It's well-written dialogue that catches you off guard. And I think it can make even more of an impact in a Marvel movie sometimes, because it's not necessarily something you're anticipating from the outset.
Sure.
Versus a think piece or an art house film or a drama where you go into it going, okay, well, I've seen dramas before, so there's going to be some deaths, there's going to be some things that you don't see coming and they're going to make you cry. Like, for as unique as some of those films like to pretend that they are, they're more similar than I think most people would care to admit.
Okay.
So for everyone out there who would think that Martin Scorsese's in the right and that his films or similar films in those veins, let's say, have emotional integrity and are well written and are true cinema where Marvel is not, I would disagree with that approach to it. I think both have their merits. I'm not saying that Martin Scorsese movies are bad. I like Martin Scorsese quite a bit. But to call one group not cinema and say that the other is, I think is pretty hypocritical. I think they both have important stories to tell. They're just going about it in a wildly different way.
I agree with you. And what's ironic is there was an article in the Hollywood Reporter today that Scorsese, a couple years ago, about 2017, was originally attached to the same Joker movie we discussed earlier in this podcast.
Yeah.
And he was supposed to be a producer of that film.
Interesting.
Now, he pulled his credit from it. Todd Phillips is the director. He was never going to direct it, from my understanding.
Okay.
Now, what we can tell you is the Joker and the movie Taxi Driver have a ton of similar themes in them. So his fingerprints or footprint or his thoughts or his influence is heavily put into this Joker movie.
Sure.
Okay. Now, that being said, so Marvel's not cinematic enough. DC, maybe it is. Right?
Yeah, maybe so.
Now, I'll put that away. But to speak on Scorsese's comments directly, I agree with you that cinema is cinema, right? Movies are movies, books are books. I looked at it this way when you brought this up earlier today. I thought about this like analogy that it reminded me of like when you talk about great books, you talk about things like To Kill a Mockingbird, right? Catcher in the Rye, Tale of Two Cities, these classics, right?
Right.
What we don't talk about is Harry Potter. But Harry Potter is extremely successful, and it's probably, it could arguably have done more for getting kids to read than say Catcher in the Rye did,
right?
Or
That's
Of Mice and Men.
Yeah,
and I think it's one of those things where, to be fair, I don't want my child to go see Goodfellas. I love Goodfellas. Yeah. I love Scorsese films. He's one of my favorite directors. I own a ton of his movies. I'm going to see The Irishman that comes out on Netflix.
Yeah,
I'm super excited for that. I think his work is great. But I think that you have to also be old enough and mature enough and have seen the Harry Potter, or seen the Marvel movies to appreciate the Goodfellas. The first movies I was watching weren't Casino. They weren't The Departed. I wasn't growing up on Scorsese films when I was young.
Right.
I was watching other movies that he would have argued are not cinematic enough or art house, like you said earlier. And I would watch those to gain the appreciation for what Scorsese's story he's telling. So, again, similarly, I have to read the Harry Potters when I'm younger so I can gain the appreciation for To Kill a Mockingbird. And probably because, and to be fair, I've never read To Kill a Mockingbird, but books on that level, if it wasn't for Harry Potter and getting me to read as a child, I'm probably not reading those books anyways, right? So yeah, there's a lot of kids that are going to be watching Marvel movies, or some of their first cinematic experiences might be, Disney or Marvel, and they're going to work their way up as they get older to watching art house films. But sometimes, how great are art house films? The movies that are going to win Best Picture, haven't seen 4 out of 5 of them probably every year for the last 10 years.
Right.
What does art house get you? And it goes to speak to about what is art house. And it's interesting because when we talk about the people who decide what's cinematic enough, these professionals or these experts, right? And I'm not knocking them. You can go to school to study film. That's what you can do.
Yeah.
You can have expert opinion because you have been more well-versed and seen more things. Again, just like anything else, I guess it doesn't mean that your opinion is correct or better than anybody else's, but you can have your opinion. And so it's funny because there was this guy who put this tweet out today that took 4 different films and was comparing what the critics said or the professionals to the audiences.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Now, I don't... Rotten Tomatoes, I have bones to pick with it. I've told you the fact that Mad Max is #1 action movie all time on Rotten Tomatoes is the biggest piece of horse shit I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, they're so right on that. I'm such a hypocrite because, out of everything on Rotten Tomatoes, I'm in complete agreement with you, Garrett. And then I saw that they did that for Mad Max. I'm like, they got one thing right at least.
Yeah, it's just absolute crap. And And granted, I do want to see I've seen Mad Max. I want to see it again.
Oh,
Fury Road.
So good, dude.
But the first one was Rambo: Last Blood, which I did see 2 weeks ago.
Yes, you've seen that very recently.
The critic score on this was 27%, but the audience score was 82%. Now, again, we're not talking about, this is people who are arguably the critics who write the articles, who do the reviews, who see it beforehand, versus the everyday person. Hustlers, the movie with Jennifer Lopez. I'm not sure exactly what it's about. I think it's a heist movie. or it's a crime thriller with a bunch of ladies.
Yeah, essentially, and my understanding about it is it's about Jennifer Lopez and some other ladies who work at a strip club, and they end up essentially stealing money. Once again, I'm sure you're getting some plot details mixed up, but they end up stealing money from their clients, essentially. And their clients are, of course, predominantly wealthy businessmen.
Got it.
So that's
good for them.
General gist of the movie, I believe.
Sure.
Yep.
Well, the critics gave this 88%, and the audience gave it 66%. So we're kind of backwards on that.
Right.
Okay. Aladdin, which I did see as well. This is a really good movie. I've actually seen, I think, every movie on this list, which is surprising. The critics gave Aladdin 57%, where the audience gave it 94%. And I was really kind of against Aladdin at first because I was very anti-Will Smith.
Right.
Again, I'm on the record. It was a great performance. He actually did a really good job. And I recommend everybody go see Aladdin. It was awesome. And then Ad Astra, which I haven't seen, but we talked to a guy at work who did see it. And he kind of said it was not for everybody.
Kind of meh, it seemed like.
83% for the critics and 40% for everybody else.
That's a big difference,
And,
too.
you know, it's interesting because are we just take these scores and say that the audience is too stupid to understand the nuances of Hustlers and Ad Astra? And, you know, that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering where the nuance of the movie Hustlers is. And it's not to knock a Jennifer Lopez movie or the movie where these strong female characters are, you know, overdoing the patriarchy or whatever it is by hustling, you know, wealthy clients. That's great. I don't know what nuance that film's going to have. Same thing with Ad Astra. I haven't seen that one, so that one I have not seen, so I can't comment from my understanding of what the movie is about from people who have seen it, though. I don't know. It doesn't sound like it's going to be that great.
Yeah, well, it's so difficult because these people are trying to make an objective decision about something that is wildly subjective. It's not objective at all. Like, you can't make a film, and I suppose you can approach it as objectively as possible by saying, here is a list of criteria, and I'm going to go through each movie that I see and review them as such. And sure, you can probably get some statistics that are going to mirror one another and try to grade it on the same scale as much as possible. But at the end of the day, a movie or a TV series or a book, whatever the hell it is, it's going to resonate with you because it does, for whatever reason that it's personal to you. So you and I are going to have vastly different opinions on different films, on different comic book movies, on different Martin Scorsese films. Like, it doesn't matter. It's just we're all going to relate to things in different ways. So audiences maybe overwhelmingly feel positive about something. Critics, which is a much smaller pool of people as well, who've been probably trained and taught to think a certain way and write a certain way and view things a certain way, are the ones who are saying, well, this is technically how you should be viewing this. It's like, no, their opinion doesn't matter.
Right.
Like, all that matters is about how you feel about what you're watching, about what you're reading. That's the important thing.
Right. Well, and to tie this back around to Scorsese, since that's where we originally got on this topic before I kind of went down a different tangent there, you know, it's interesting he's putting this movie out on Netflix. Because I know Spielberg has been on record of saying that you know, Netflix should not be taken into account when we talk about Academy Awards. Well, The Irishman, if there's not a movie outside of The Joker or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that should be up for Academy Awards, it's probably going to be The Irishman. You know, you're talking to Pacino and De Niro and Joe Pesci again and Ray Romano and all these other guys.
It's got the de-aging thing going on too. Like, it looks really cool.
It's going to be great.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be just like a Goodfellas, a Casino or a Departed. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
It's going to love it. I love mafia movies. I love dirty cop movies. I'm going to love a Jimmy Hoffa story, you know, done by these guys. So, but again, it's not to say I'm not saying he's, you know, I don't think he's, I should say it, he is wrong, I guess to say. Scorsese, I would say my opinion of Scorsese is that he is wrong in this instance. And that, you know, Marvel, especially Endgame, and so specifically the Infinity War, or, you know, Infinity War and Endgame are very well done. They are, and if you cried during Guardians 2, you're going to cry during Endgame.
Oh yeah, I anticipate that I will do so, which I still have not seen.
I know you haven't
embarrassingly.
Seen well, that's because to be fair, you're waiting for Disney Plus. Well, because you might as well at this point.
A big part of it. Right. That's true. Like you said, T-minus a few weeks at this point.
Yeah.
So,
but I don't know why we have to pick on the Marvel stuff for it, you know. But
like anything, it's the biggest target out there.
Yeah, I get
You know,
it. I get maybe what his anxiety is that we're moving towards, again, kind of like we talked about a Marvelification of Star Wars.
Yeah.
Is everything got to be a Marvel movie or it doesn't get made by a studio now? Maybe that's what he's recommending, is saying it's not art house film. Is this new movie he's making through Netflix because he got funded through Netflix. I'm not doubting that Martin Scorsese could get a movie made through another, channel. But is it possible that with the de-aging that he needs a bigger budget, and some studios are going to say, listen, your movie's great, but what it's going to cost to make it versus what I'm going to make on this movie in the theaters is not worth it compared to a Marvel movie. And maybe that's what the bones are to pick with this, is that studios are trying to find the movies that are profitable versus the movies that are good. And I think that maybe is what's going to bite Scorsese in the ass here, is that his movies are very good, but maybe they're not going to make as much money as, say, the fifth installment of whatever Avengers or superhero movies coming out. And that's not necessarily the right way to look at things either. We don't want all Marvel movies, all Star Wars movies. But again, if you're going to put up money to produce it, you obviously want to make money on the back end of it.
Absolutely.
So, and I think that The Joker, has showed you that things like Scorsese's movies can fit, because I would say The Joker is very much art house, is very nuanced film. So again, and since he was tied to it originally, and it's basically kind of a Taxi Driver-ish movie,
Yeah.
It's just interesting that he took that approach towards Marvel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Well, something else, too, I just wanted to bring up with Marvel really quickly. We don't have to spend too much time on this, but this is something that excited me quite a lot. So Marvel very recently announced that they're collaborating with Games Workshop to create Warhammer comics. So if there are any tabletop gamers out there, I'm sure Games Workshop, and more specifically Warhammer, is not something that is foreign to you. For anyone who doesn't know, Warhammer is, I won't even say arguably, it is the most popular tabletop war game on the face of the planet, and they've been very successful for many years with this. So I'm really excited. It has got so much content to pull from here. They have what's called the Black Library, and it's basically this huge catalog of books about the universe of Warhammer, be it in their fantasy setting. Currently, they're doing something called Age of Sigmar for that. Or if it's Warhammer 40K, which is a bunch of futuristic space marines fighting, basically xenomorphs, essentially, or orcs. You even have orcs there too, right? So it's just, the universe is completely bonkers. Seeing Marvel, in a good way, seeing Marvel partner with Games Workshop to create some comic books, I'm really excited for this. Now, they have done this in the past, Games Workshop, that is. There have been Warhammer comics in the past, so that in and of itself is not new. But to see them partner with Marvel, which their track record speaks for itself, of course, I'm really excited to see what will come from that arrangement, essentially. And I'll probably end up picking some of these up. We've talked before, Garrett, I don't necessarily own very many comic books. I'm not an authority on comic books at all. I'm a big Hellboy fan. I own a lot of Hellboy comics. But outside of that, for Marvel and DC, both, for example, don't really own very many comics at all. This might be something I try to get in on the ground floor with, because I really love Warhammer. Just picked up some stuff within the past week or two, actually.
That's because somebody had a birthday.
Yeah, that's true. I did have a birthday. So I got some Warhammer guys. I've been big into Star Wars Legion, which is a Star Wars tabletop version, essentially. I've got my own Warhammer guys. I'm going to start painting and building up. So this was a perfect announcement for me. Like, while I'm on my own personal hype train for everything Warhammer related, they dropped this. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is going to be amazing. But what I did want to ask you, Garrett, because I know you don't really read comic books, which is totally fine.
Nope.
Is there a collaboration between Marvel, or maybe DC, or maybe Dark Horse Comics, with an existing franchise of some kind that you are interested in? Let's say if Harry Potter, for example.
I was just going to go there.
Yeah.
Give me some HP, man.
Yeah.
I'm up for Harry Potter for anything.
Cool.
I love Harry Potter. And not that I would be against a tabletop game for it, because I think they're fun. So hard to find a consistent time to get into it week after week after week.
It is.
And unlike you, I have no patience for painting miniatures. So if it was up to me, they would either all be gray because they came out of the box that way, or
Sure.
simply they'd all be black because I spray painted them all black. So I have no patience for the painting of things. I think it's fabulous that you do. I think the art that people put on some of those paintings and the details are great. So again, not
seeing some of the
knocking
professional stuff is
yeah,
insane.
I think it's great. I'm just not have the patience to do it,
Oh,
or to be
fair
fair,
enough.
the skill to do it. Let's put it that way. But I think a Harry Potter tabletop game with miniatures would be classic. Again, I told you, open Harry Potter up, sell the rights, J.K. Rowling, give it up. Let everybody have what they want. Let's get some Death Eaters for some auras. Let's get some, Dumbledore's army out there. Let's get that going. I think that's the universe. If I think of all the potential that's out there, like that's the universe that exists. Because the reason why I would pick Harry Potter over something like, say, Lord of the Rings is because Lord of the Rings is that fantasy element. To me, that already exists in tabletop gaming. Right?
They literally
it's very
have
similar.
It's made by Games Workshop.
Oh, it's already game. Okay,
no joke.
perfect.
Yeah, they have a Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit tabletop game.
But even if it wasn't, a lot of the stuff that already exists is very similar to that feel.
Yeah.
But again, if you want a Harry Potter universe, you could get kids in this, get them when they're really young, because it wouldn't be as, say, maybe scary to some kids to have, skulls and orcs and whatever not. And it could be a lot more, I would say, child friendly.
Yeah, Warhammer's very graphic, for
Correct.
sure. Yeah.
So I think that a Harry Potter would be a great place to start, and you get them young, get them hooked.
Yeah, for comic books as well. Would that be a comic book you would read? A Harry Potter comic book?
Maybe. There is one comic book I want to read, and I have not ordered this. I've looked this comic book up on Amazon. Actually, I looked up this comic book on Amazon a couple months ago.
Okay.
And you know what I thought about the other day?
What?
I need a telescope.
Okay.
I know this is off topic, but I need a telescope. I was outside.
This is the Aliens and Cowboys podcast, Garrett. This isn't off topic.
I was outside looking for alien spaceships again, like I do every night. And I was like, I need a telescope. I have not talked it over with my wife yet. I don't know what telescopes cost. I have not looked into it.
I have no idea what the pricing is on
Probably
those.
we do that at work tomorrow. But I'm going to look into a telescope. But regardless, the comic book I looked into as a crossover of Snake Plissken and Jack Burton. They do a comic book crossover of both
so
Kurt
cool.
Russell characters. And I looked into a Jack Burton comic book, which exists. And again, they do a crossover with Snake Plissken. And I thought that would just be awesome. I don't know how... It's not a dark comic. I don't think it's like a graphic novel.
Sure.
I think it's just a fun comic. So I think that would be really interesting.
That definitely would be interesting, yeah.
Yeah, but I would
funny, man.
Harry Potter, I'd like it. Again, I need J.K. Rowling to sell it. I don't have faith in her anymore. She's not going to give people what they want. She's way too much into retconning things to virtue signal out things. Again, no problem if you want to make characters X, Y, and Z the way that they are. That's fine. But then put that in the book. I don't want you to wait for the books to sell 1 billion copies and come back and go, oh, that character was really this way. Because I just feel like you're throwing a curveball at me there. And again, I hate retconning sometimes because it seems cheap. It seems like it's a money grab. And I don't respect it.
Right. Yeah, retconning frustrates me too, regardless of the reasoning behind it. J.K. Rowling aside, like Star Wars does it all the time. Even prior to the acquisition of Lucasfilm by Disney, like they just would go back in and be like, actually, we're going to make this guy's backstory this instead of what it was for 3 books already. It's actually now this. It's like, oh, okay, whatever you say.
Speaking of this,
yeah.
I didn't know this because, again, not a comic book fan.
Sure.
But I was listening to a podcast this weekend, and they were talking about the Joker movie, but really the history of the Joker character.
Oh, cool.
Through iterations of comics all the way through all the movies to get to where, Joaquin Phoenix's character is. And they were talking about Tim Burton's Batman with Jack Nicholson as the Joker. And again, it was 89 that came out?
Yeah, I think so.
So I'm 2 years old at the time. Okay, so I was born in 87. They said that movie that got people up in arms over the retconning of the Joker killing his parents. Never knew that till this weekend. I was this many years old when I found out that people were really upset about it. So it's not a new thing for people to get up, especially comic book fans, to get up in arms over things.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
But I just thought that was really interesting because, I don't know what outlet they would have really had to express their anger in 89 compared to Twitter, obviously, as the cesspool that it is now. Which, by the way, if you don't have a Twitter account, it's the most amazing thing in the world. You just got to get on there and throw a couple grenades every once in a while. But the fact that they were just, like I said, up in arms over that retconning, I could respect that.
Yeah.
Again, just don't like retconning I don't like retconning for the sake of being virtue signaling. That's all. If you want to be that real way, think about it. And it's interesting because later tonight, we're actually going to do 2 episodes to our podcast tonight.
Yes.
We're going to do this podcast episode for Aliens and Cowboys, and then the podcast we've been promising you forever for V for Vendetta on the Watchmen for Nixon podcast we're putting out tonight. So,
finally happening.
Yes, stay tuned. That will be released. Hopefully, if we get it recorded before midnight, it will show up tomorrow. If not, it will show up the next day. But it will be recorded tonight. But I was reading about Alan Moore's comic. The original intent of, I think, V was supposed to technically be a transsexual character.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I thought that was
I didn't
interesting.
know that.
Now, it turns out to not be. But if they were to now retcon that into a transsexual character, I would argue, why are we doing that? Okay, and again, that's just, I've been on the record of, I want characters to be who they are. So like the James Bond controversy, I am a purist when it comes to that. I'm a purist to any character. I want characters to be original. I want them to be strong, which, is interesting because John Wick, there's a female assassin that's going to be made for the ballerina movie.
Yeah.
That is going to exist in John Wick's world. I think that's fantastic. I hope she kicks ass.
Yeah.
I'm going to go see that movie.
I think that'll be awesome.
I hope she's great. Okay? Perfect. Grab something that's original and put it in there. And you know what? It's going to work. It's going to be successful. So I agree with you. So
Cool.
Anything else to add on that one?
Cool, man. No, I think that's, dare I say, the last Marvel-related topic I had for this evening.
Until the next one.
Until the next one. Until I remember the thing I forgot.
Yeah. Do you have any other topics before we get to the Chinese-Hong Kong controversy?
I did, actually. Just the one. This is something that I just discovered the other day. I'd heard about the movie 1917. Have you seen anything
I've seen the previews
about
for
this?
it. Yes. So
looks fantastic.
I've been to a movie every week recently, which is actually something that's kind of odd for me. But it's been on every preview I've seen so far.
Oh, cool.
And it looks amazing.
Yeah.
It's a Rodriguez movie. Is that correct?
Oh, gosh. I want to say it's Sam Mendes.
It is, because it's Skyfall.
Let me double check.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, okay,
It's
cool.
the Skyfall director. And Benedict Cumberbatch is in it, but he's not the main character.
He's not.
It's kind of two lesser-known guys, from my understanding.
It is, yeah.
And it looks awesome.
Looks super, super good. What I found most intriguing about this, and first of all, just to recap briefly, if you could probably guess by the year, which is the title of the movie, 1917, set during the First World War, it does follow two privates in the British military that essentially are given a mission to deliver a message across enemy territory, okay? So they've got this very dangerous mission. They have to deliver this message. That's the gist of the movie. What's going to set this apart, and I cannot wait to see this on the big screen, I'm going to try to see this one in theaters, is because supposedly this entire movie is one continuous shot. Now, that doesn't mean literally, of course, the camera's rolling from start to finish, but sequentially, and in terms of how characters get from A to B, it is a single shot. That is mind-blowing.
Of every scene?
Of every scene. So in terms of the characters getting from A to B, well, obviously there will be different camera wipes and things of that nature. And of course they have to pause and cut and do all these things and re-edit pieces together. But for all intents and purposes, when the movie starts and you see these characters for the first time, you hit go. And it's as if you had a GoPro on these guys doing their mission to deliver this message behind enemy lines. It sounds amazing.
Well, theatrically, it looks amazing. Like, this is a movie you have to see in theater.
Yeah.
It's just baffling to me that you're not baffling, but it's just funny that you're gonna make time to see this one, but not Endgame.
Well, yeah, fair enough.
But as someone who I thought Dunkirk should have won Best Picture, just because
was phenomenal.
Just because it was such a different take on a war movie.
Yes.
And I thought it was so original and so amazing and interesting. And I don't understand if that's not what Best Picture is about. I don't know what should be Best Picture. When we talk about that things are not original in Hollywood anymore, that was an original interpretation of a war movie. You maybe saw one or two people get killed, and it's a war movie. Okay? Very impressive.
Yeah, it was.
This movie, I'm expecting it to be a lot more bloody, a lot more casualties.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, too, because World War I films aren't generally depicted versus World War II and Vietnam and even Korea at this time.
That's a good point.
It's a really interesting take for a World War I film to be made. And just like you said, I think it's going to be great. And I do plan on seeing this in theater. I think my wife even wants to see this movie.
Nice.
I know my father does. So if she doesn't want to go with me, I'll probably take him.
Sure.
Because he likes war movies. But, again, it kind of reminds me of this, similar path of Saving Private Ryan, which was an original work, to Dunkirk, which is an original work, to this. It's just something different. So, very excited.
Very much so. There's a behind-the-scenes featurette, if you guys want to check it out, which kind of explains the process much better than I just tried to do. So you guys should go try to check that out. And obviously, it doesn't I said GoPro as well. This isn't a first-person perspective of the movie, just in terms of a continuous running camera is the effect that they're going for, is what I meant by that. But you guys know by now, I'm sure if you've been listening for a while, I'm a big fan of practical effects as well. So the set pieces for this look amazing, and most of them are outside as well. And then in addition to that, it shows this overhead shot of part of the production of the film, so I'm not sure this exact shot would be in the movie, of course, but it does this overhead shot of the extras running out of the trench during a scene that is in the previews, I believe.
Yes, I think
it's more on the ground level.
It's when the 1917 is coming across the screen.
Yeah, and it is the number of extras it looks like they got for this, and the actual practical effects, the explosions that are happening around them, the set pieces, the fact that it is one continuous shot, it looks like it will be a cinematic experience, truly. So
yeah, don't disagree.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that movie coming out. Real quick here, before, I don't know if there's anything else before we hit Hong Kong.
I don't believe so.
I wanted to ask you this. This is a tangent, and I don't know a ton of what this movie is about. I've seen previews for it, but you were speaking today about how you have such admiration for Taika Waititi.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about Jojo Rabbit, if you can. If you know anything about it. If you don't, it's okay. We can come back to it next week.
This is one. Talk about controversial movies. If you think Joker was controversial.
But there's no controversy behind this movie.
I don't. Yeah, I saw an article or two about it that was talking about potential controversy, and then honestly, it looks like Joker took over as the focus of all the controversy. So yeah, to set this movie up, which once again, probably watching the trailer is just the best way to try to wrap your head around what this movie is. Basically, my understanding, set during World War II, Taika Waititi plays Adolf Hitler in the film, but he plays Adolf Hitler as a essentially figment of this young boy's imagination who is being indoctrinated essentially into the Nazi Party. So some pretty heavy material, to put it mildly, that they're dealing with this film. However, since it's Taika Waititi that's directing it, it's of course a satire as well for the Nazi Party and Adolf Hitler. And I'm very curious to see his portrayal and how they tackle some of these very controversial issues, clearly, in this film. And in addition to that, of course, my understanding is that they're going to still spin it in a way where the main character obviously learns about himself and learns why the Nazi Party is evil, and obviously comes to that realization through the fact, the other major part of this is there's actually a Jewish girl that's being hidden in his house, I believe, by his mother.
Correct.
So that is going to be the primary dynamic that I think this film focuses on. So you're going to have this young boy that's being indoctrinated essentially into the Nazi Party. It's going to follow him, but then he has this Jewish girl that he begins to form a friendship with and form a relationship with. All the while, once again, my understanding, kind of hallucinating or seeing Taika Waititi as Adolf Hitler, which is kind of his imaginary friend of sorts. It looks totally insane.
Yes. So the plot synopsis is lonely German boy, Jojo
We should have just
Rabbit.
read that.
No, you did fine.
Thanks.
Jojo Boy Rabbit has his worldview turned upside down when he discovers that his single mother, Rosie, played by Scarlett Johansson, is hiding a young Jewish girl, Thomasine McKenzie, in their attic. Aided only by his imaginary friend in the form of an idiotic version of Adolf Hitler, played by Taika Waititi, Jojo must confront the ideology of Nazism. The cast on this is Scarlett Johansson, Taika Waititi, Sam Rockwell, Rebel Wilson, Alfie Allen, Stephen Merchant. I mean, it's a pretty big cast of people.
It is.
It just seems like such an interesting movie. I will tell you, the audience score is not in yet, obviously, because it debuts October 18th.
Gotcha.
So this would be an interesting movie if you're going to see it in theaters. The critic score on this, though, is 80%. So
wow, okay.
Obviously not that controversial to... It's controversial to talk about white male violence. It is not controversial to actually talk about Nazism. So, whatever. Either way. Anyway.
Yeah, but exactly after seeing Thor Ragnarok, that's kind of what prompted me to go back through Taika Waititi's filmography, essentially. And there's a number of other things I still need to see, like What We Do in the Shadows, I believe is what it's called. I need to check that out still, and some of his other material as well. But I absolutely loved Thor Ragnarok. I loved Korg, who is the rock guy, essentially, who is voiced by Taika Waititi in Thor Ragnarok. He's, of course, playing the IG droid in the upcoming Mandalorian series, so he will be voicing that character On The Mandalorian, I mean, this guy is going full speed ahead right now.
Now,
So,
knowing that you've only really seen, one film of his now?
I technically have only seen Thor Ragnarok.
But
yeah.
he's got to be on your, because you've talked about him quite often, he's got to be on your top list of actors, correct?
I would say...
Or not actors, apologies, directors.
Well, no, as director, yeah. I mean, it's probably presumptuous of me to say that just because Thor Ragnarok is really the only thing I've seen him direct. But I did find that movie to be phenomenal. Really, really enjoyed it. And I'm definitely looking forward to see what other projects he's attached to from here on out. So, yes, in terms of if I'm going to put a director in my top 5 list, let's say, based on my interest in their work.
Perfect.
Absolutely. So, yeah.
Okay, nice. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Oh, another, just in closing as well, I think...
Tangent it up.
Sorry. Well, yeah, kind of. I just happened to think about this,
we have
but
no blueprint for this episode.
When he was interviewed, Taika Waititi was interviewed about Jojo Rabbit coming out here. I think he had tried to cast other people in the role of Hitler, and everyone was like, "No, absolutely not. I'm not going to be playing."
Well, Hitler's not portrayed a lot in films, specifically American cinema.
Right.
I'm trying to think of movies that I can think off the top of my head where you actually see Hitler. Indiana Jones.
I was going to say, yeah, Indiana Jones.
Last Crusade. Valkyrie, briefly. And then maybe Inglourious Bastards.
Yeah.
And then Inglourious Bastards might be
Inglourious...
the only one where you actually see somebody acting out, Hitler as like talking. Because you only really see him on the book signing in Last Crusade at the book burning, essentially, right, where he autographs the journal, essentially. And I haven't seen Valkyrie for a while, starring Tom Cruise.
It's been a long time
but
since
I know
I've seen
Hitler's
that one, too.
depicted in there. I just don't know if you see him talk at all, or if you really see him that often, or if he's just like, his presence is felt over the film. Whether he's actually, you see him more than the one time that I think they try to actually assassinate him.
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to remember on some of those too, but yeah. So anyway, long story short, long story long. At this point, he had said that no one else wanted to play Hitler, so eventually he decided that he would just do it himself, and that he found that concept kind of ironic because of, I believe, his heritage. I think he's of Jewish heritage as well. So he thought it'd be actually perfect as an FU to Hitler, the fact that he has Jewish heritage and he's playing Hitler. So I just thought that was interesting too. Once again, go out, read the interview. He's going to explain it much better himself than what I just did.
I would wonder if his performance would be similar to that of like Charlie Chaplin.
From the preview, it definitely
he looks like Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah.
Charlie Chaplin looked like Hitler. Like, I get, right, you know what I mean? Similar by design.
Yeah.
In those, I don't even remember the name of the film, but Charlie Chaplin, I'm not to say that, obviously they're saying an idiotic version of him, so I guess I don't know if he's a mute in this movie. But it would be interesting. I'm interested in seeing this. I don't know if I'll rush the theaters to see this particular film.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll actually rush out to see it in theaters.
I would think this would be a movie that would be fun to watch. And I mean, great cast.
Yeah, definitely a great cast.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway.
Well, let's put a bow on this episode for our last topic, because who knows how long this topic will talk. Maybe it'll be 5 minutes. Maybe it'll be 30 minutes. Because we have a second podcast episode to do tonight. So, I'm a big NBA fan, and it's really more of an NBA controversy right now, but it really speaks to larger American culture, specifically like Hollywood. And, one of the things, for instance, is on Friday, last Friday, I should say, Daryl Morey, a general manager of a Houston Rockets, which is the basketball team for Houston, which is a representative of like China. It's kind of like their representative team in America. Yao Ming, a great Chinese basketball player, was their star player for many years. Well received here in America. Great relationship between the Rockets and China. And China's international sport, or homeland sport is basketball. So huge relationship, billions of dollars relationship between China as a market and the NBA.
Okay.
Now, on Friday, Daryl Morey, again, general manager for the Rockets, tweeted out his support for Hong Kong and going forward with these protests in Hong Kong between, wanting democracy and China wanting to crack down on it. Now, not going to turn this into a huge political history podcast about the issues between Hong Kong and China. We could start a third podcast for that later. But what's interesting is what happened after this tweet came out. So, again, great relationship between the NBA and China. And NBA is way more globalized than, say, the NFL. Hasn't really had the issues that, say, the NFL has had recently with some of their controversies, like with Colin Kaepernick and kneeling during the national anthem and whatnot, right? But China cracked down on this tweet. And Daryl Morey was forced to basically backpedal and apologize. He deleted the tweet. From my understanding, China has 11, I think, companies that help sponsor NBA have pulled their sponsorship or at least suspended it, their relationship with the NBA. China has banned the Houston Rockets games from being shown on TV right now. They have stopped preseason games between American teams playing in Chinese teams. In America, in the last 24 hours, there was a Philadelphia 76ers game against a Chinese national team or Chinese team, and signs were confiscated in America saying free Hong Kong. I mean, really interesting take here. But the reason why I bring this up, not just to talk sports, but again, a huge basketball fan, but it's this idea of there's many people in the NBA. Coaches like Steve Kerr, Greg Popovich, players like Steph Curry, LeBron James, big names, who speak out on politics in American culture every day. Very anti-Trump. No team that has won a title since Trump has been in presidency has gone to the White House. Okay, and this is not a pro-Trump podcast. It's not a pro-Trump conversation. But it's to say that these guys have no problem speaking out on politics in America. When they put a microphone in their voices now in front of their faces for this particular topic, they're all quick to say, I don't know the full history of it. I don't want to comment on it. It's way more of a difficult topic to talk about. So basically, people have called them cowards, and I am one of them. And it's sad because I'm a big NBA fan. It's my sport that I choose to follow. And it's really interesting that these guys, I understand them picking billions of dollars in revenue over principle. I understand that choice. But I also think it's really funny. Because again, tomorrow they'll probably come out and they'll do an anti-Trump tweet about something. But they can't crack down. They don't know the history of communist regimes.
Right.
They don't know the history of communist China. Like, how do they not understand the crackdown on human rights violations that China has had since like the 1950s? The idea that they're like, well, I don't feel like I could speak on this topic. To be fair, I don't think any of these guys are professionals on any particular American political stance either, but they still have an opinion because they're allowed to. And I think it's funny that these guys now can't have an opinion on, stuff going on. And the reason why I bring this up isn't to talk basketball. Again, it's to talk things like Hollywood, because Hollywood has no problem Disney having their films made in China, and they want access to that market because it's billions of dollars for them.
Right.
At what point going forward does the $1 billion market that China represents become a problem with them saying, I want it this way, or we don't show your stuff, and they crack down on American privileges or American rights here just to make the money in, I don't know. It's an interesting topic.
It is an interesting topic, and I think it is one that'll probably become more and more relevant as well. To your point, especially with Disney specifically, since you brought it up, Star Wars, because of course I tie everything back to Star Wars, but has a history of having a lot of difficulty, that's my understanding anyway, breaking in to that particular market. For whatever reason, it just does not do well there.
Well, that's because it shows a rebellion versus an empire.
Yeah, well, there's that.
That would be on first glance, that would be my opinion.
Right, but it's not like it doesn't. They show them there. So there's some things, and I'm not just talking about China, other countries where you have movies that just straight up aren't allowed to be shown. Or if they are allowed to be shown, they edit out certain portions of it because maybe it's a topic that's culturally sensitive to them, or maybe it's something that is looked down upon in that particular society that maybe doesn't have as much free speech as we do here in the States. So there's a variety of different reasons for this, right? I don't believe that in China that's the case. I think they release the movies, the full films over there in China. It's just not something that historically has done very well. Could be your point, Garrett. It absolutely could have something to do with that, but I don't think they're censoring anything to it.
Here's something interesting, though.
Yeah,
I always remember this particular movie because of China's influence. So, in 2012, there was the remake of the movie Red Dawn.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember this movie?
Yeah, I do.
It was Chris Hemsworth, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Isabel Lucas, Josh Peck, Josh Hutcherson.
Yeah, I remember because at the very end, spoiler alert, they shoot Chris Hemsworth for no reason.
I don't remember that in the film.
Do you remember that? Yeah. If I'm remembering correctly, it's like the movie's over for all intents and purposes, and then he just gets sniped through a window.
Oh, Maybe.
For like no
I
real
only
reason.
saw it
But
once. I didn't think it was that good of a film.
No,
Definitely
I
as
did
good as
not
the
either,
first
and
film.
that's part that left me the most baffled. I'm like, what was that even for? I digress.
No,
I'm sorry
it's okay.
to detract from your
the
statement.
original villains in the film, though, were supposed to be Chinese communists. To get access to the Chinese market, they changed them to North Koreans.
Gotcha.
They still did not get access to the Chinese market. But it's interesting because just to get access to, again, billions of dollars, which, again, I fully comprehend and understand that. It's not lost on me. But it's ironic that the principles that these people that will virtue signal every day will quick to change them. And so, again, not to go too far into the Hong Kong protests, I am hoping that, the NBA will stay strong with Daryl Morey. And I'm hoping that, Hollywood will understand that, they're so quick to pull out of states like Georgia and North Carolina over perceived laws or laws in those particular states. Again, I understand that. That's fair. But the idea that they're not going to pull out of human rights conditions in China is 100% hypocritical.
Yeah.
And I would just appreciate if people were consistent in their political stances. And, that's all, that's kind of where I want to put that, bow on that topic is it's just an interesting topic going forward as Disney Plus comes out, as more Marvel comes out, as Star Wars comes out. Where do they go going forward in China, knowing that China is currently cracking down on democracy and protests in Hong Kong?
Well, and Disney is having to deal with some of this directly as well because of their remake of Mulan.
Ah, that's right.
So there was some, and I
because
don't...
the actors came out.
Yes.
The actors came out and tweeted, I believe, pro-China tweets.
Correct.
And that's just her. Do you think Jackie Chan did it?
Okay,
And
I
think
didn't hear about that, but
caught a lot of
certainly
flack.
possibility.
I could try to double check that, but I'm pretty sure.
Sure.
But yes, and people were already saying boycott Disney, boycott Mulan.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, so I mean, this is something, once again, to your point, Garrett, yeah, it's absolutely, I think, going to have a far-reaching impact. And while the NBA, especially in terms of a revenue source, is probably at the forefront of this right now, we can see some other examples already shaping up to probably be impacting them as well. So them being Hollywood as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Jackie Chan did get it.
He did? Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
he definitely caught some problems. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that's famous that has caught the same issues. But it's an interesting topic. And it's not easy for us to say what they're allowed to say. It's a very oppressive regime over in China. It's a very, when we talk about maybe for Vendetta later, we could talk about China.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're obviously, mass surveilled and they probably don't have a lot of freedom to speak with their mind. I would just wish that the people here who had the freedom to speak their mind would be consistent upon it and not backpedal to a regime across the world.
Sure.
Let's put it this way. People like LeBron James, how much more money can they really make if they were to stand up for principle? And it's interesting because there was always a saying that Michael Jordan, who's obviously extremely famous,
right,
he gets a lot of flack from people because he wasn't as great of a social warrior as modern day athletes are. Like, he didn't speak out on topics of controversy. He wasn't really political. And he used to have the saying, well, Republican kids buy shoes too. And it's funny because Chinese obviously buy whatever. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what it comes down to is Chinese will go see the movies. Chinese will buy, NBA products or NBA games. And that seems to be what it comes down to is obviously the bottom dollar. Again, fully comprehending that. I don't want to hear them make the comments, tomorrow on anything political or, Disney to make comments on, Mulan and going forward.
Right.
So interesting thing. But
yeah.
Anything else topic for this particular evening, Joe?
No, man. I think that'll do it for stuff that I'd want to talk about.
Yeah. So we want to thank you guys for joining us tonight. We'll be back next week, as always, with the Aliens Cowboys podcast. In the meantime, Joe and I are going to record one more episode tonight. This is going to be a movie review or just a discussion on the movie V for Vendetta. Yeah. That's going to be basically uploaded under the Watchmen for Nixon podcast. We're a little late to the game on that one. That was supposed to come out last month. Apologies. We're trying to get this in because October 20th, the Watchmen TV show on HBO actually starts. And again, that's going to be a weekly podcast that we're going to cover during the airing of that show, as well as continuing to do the Aliens Cowboys podcast weekly. So again, go out, give us a review, leave us a rating, give us 5 stars if you'd like, give us less if you think we deserve it, which we probably don't. Hoping to have Nate and Ellie back soon. Mm-hmm. They're out doing their own thing for right now. But we hope that they're happy, healthy, and will come back to us. Until then, obviously we'll be here. And again, we're going to record the next episode here. So join us on Watchmen for Nixon.
Yeah.
And we'll see you guys all next week. Cheers.
Cheers.